Hi, I'm Dustin Riekman.
And I'm Bethany Riekman.
We've been married for 15 years. We have 3 kids, and we run a website called engagedmarriage.com, where we help both engaged couples and couples that have been married for the newlywed years all the way through many years of marriage with a lot of topics that come up throughout the course of their life. And one topic that we cover extensively is natural family planning.
So what is natural family planning? It's a method of awareness of a woman's fertility cycle. And this can be used to both postpone and achieve pregnancy, but it does not include any forms of artificial birth control, no condoms, IUDs, birth control, or anything like that. But it does track a woman's fertility cycle, and there are a number of different ways that you can do that, different methods of natural family planning.
So you may or may not have even heard of natural family planning, and your understanding of it may vary from reality, which is why we're going to shed some light on it for you here. So maybe why haven't you heard of it if it's a new term to you? Well, one is society certainly promotes artificial birth control. There's no question about that, whether it's your experience with your own physician or all you have to do is even watch commercials during football games and you'll see condom commercials, artificial birth control pill commercials, IUD commercials. There's certainly a big commercial interest in promoting artificial birth control. Another thing that comes up is it's often perceived as just a Catholic thing, which isn't reality. However, it's the thing that we hear very, very often from people. They say, oh, that's some crazy Catholic thing, and they've never taken any time or interest to really find out what NFP is all about. And even within the church, there can be a lack of awareness. Oftentimes, it's not part of a catechism process if you were a cradle Catholic and brought up in the church, and it's often not introduced as part of RCIA, which is the rite of Christian initiation of adults if you're a convert to the church like I was. There was no discussion of natural family planning as part of either of our education processes. And sometimes very frustrating, as we're going to share in our own story, even the clergy sometimes, even our own priests, aren't really aware of what NFP is. Or if they are, they have a very narrow view of it and they don't understand the full implications as it relates to us as married couples. So again, we want to be able to share that with you now so you can have a full understanding and make informed decisions about how you plan your family.
We're going to share with you our story about how we were introduced to and began using natural family planning. And it did not start before our wedding. When we first got married, we were using artificial birth control. We weren't completely comfortable with it, but we really weren't aware of another method that we could use to plan our family. We were probably about 4 years into our marriage, and we were on a vacation. We went camping, and we attended Mass at a church that was not our own parish. And the priest there was giving a homily on the reasons why you shouldn't receive communion, reasons that you might want to abstain, from receiving communion because of things in your life. And, he talked about fasting before Mass and even smoking. But the one that really hit home to us was the use of artificial birth control. And that was really one of the first times that we had heard that it wasn't, that it was a moral, really a bad sin. And so, that kind of got us talking and thinking about what that means for our marriage and our relationship and our faith. So we made an appointment to talk with our priest, which is not really a fun thing to do.
Right. So we had this experience on vacation. Again, we weren't comfortable before that, even to the extent that we were sometimes doubling up on our contraception because we knew that there were some potential side effects if we were to become pregnant and then have some artificial birth control kick in. So we were actually using 2 forms of contraception at a time, ironically, to avoid some of those implications. So we were clearly confused on the whole matter. And when we had this experience on vacation, as Bethany said, we went back and made an appointment with our priest and had a tough discussion. Unfortunately, we didn't really get any fruit from that discussion because what our priest told us was that it was really not a big deal. It was okay. In his school of thinking, the way that he was brought up in seminary, there were certainly exceptions for why you wouldn't want to use artificial birth control. So we came away from that feeling pretty hollow. We still didn't feel that this was right, and we were seeking additional information. And in hindsight, we feel it was really by the grace of God that it was really right around that time that we started seriously considering starting a family within our marriage. So being planners as we were, engineer by trade and teacher by trade, we were trying to plan that family and plan whenever we would have our first child to really coincide with the best time of year. So in searching for that, what we found were methods of tracking a woman's fertility that allowed you to plan your pregnancy better. And that was really our whole foray into this adventure. So.
And as we know, God's plan is always bigger than our plan, and we didn't do a very good job of deciding when we should have children. So God took care of that for us. But, we used the natural family planning symptothermal method to achieve pregnancy, and then really took a class on that to learn more about it. And from there have discovered other really important and useful methods that both agree with the church's teaching and really benefit our marriage.
So why does the Catholic Church support and even promote natural family planning? Well, as Bethany said earlier, artificial birth control is considered immoral and gravely sinful, to put it in plain terms. In fact, in the Catholic Church, this has always been the case. And all Christian churches, really up until the 1960s, prohibited artificial birth control.
Artificial birth control is an abortifacient, so that if someone were to conceive, it would not sustain life within the woman. And so the church believes strongly that that is something that's really negative, because we support life in all stages. And so you may be thinking, well, then what does the church want us to do, and how does natural family planning fit into that? So natural family planning promotes healthy marriages because it really makes us have to communicate with one another. But also, and one of the most important things, is that it keeps couples in touch with and open to God's will for them, for children in their marriage.
Absolutely. So you may be thinking, I understand why we shouldn't be using artificial birth control in the church's eyes, but what's the difference, right? If we're wanting to plan our family and we're making conscious decisions about when we should be having children, what's the difference between doing that with an artificial birth control or this thing called natural family planning? Well, an important distinction between the two is that with NFP, you're simply not having sex at fertile times if you've been open to God's will and you've prayerfully considered that it's not the right time to have children. So that's an important distinction. You're not having sex at fertile times if you're wishing to postpone pregnancy, unlike artificial birth control, where you can have sex anytime, regardless of the situation, and you're not required to be in touch with that will and have those prayerful considerations. And I think the best way to really understand this is with a simple analogy.
So we talked about the church looking at sex within marriage as a renewal of your wedding vows. So let's, think about that. When you are being intimate with your spouse, then you are renewing your wedding vows, okay? Now, we want to have, God be a part of that. We want to enjoy this gift fully with him. But when you're using contraception, you are disinviting God. So if we're going to, celebrate the act of sex within our marriage, we're going to invite God to come and be a part of that. He made it for us. We're going to be, together in that.
And if we aren't having sex, then there is no wedding, there is no invitation to send out.
But when you're using contraception, what you're doing is you're telling God, hey, God, we're going to renew these wedding vows, but you're not going to be a part of it. So we're sending a disinvitation, which is not, what God wants. He wants us to be able to give ourselves fully and completely to each other. And NFP allows for us to do that. Like Dustin said, if we're abstaining from sex within our marriage because we prayerfully considered that, then, this is what the church says. We are open to and in touch with God's will for our family.
And even aside from all the reasons revolving around faith for considering NFP, there are a lot of just practical benefits to your marriage.
Yeah, one of the major ones is that it's safe and there are no side effects. A lot of people really are paying attention to the foods they eat and the kinds of things they put into their body. And artificial birth control is a chemical medicine, I guess, that you're putting into your body. And so there are a lot of side effects that go along with that, whereas natural family planning doesn't have any negative side effects. It's also just as effective as artificial birth control. It's 99% effective when used properly. So, there's no questioning whether or not it's a good method for planning your family. It's also free. There's no charge to some of these methods. You might have to take a class to learn how to do it, but there are very few materials that cost anything. And it's very effective in both postponing and achieving pregnancy. And again, it's just the church supports this because it's a great way for you and your spouse to discuss the children that you want to have in your family.
And in addition to those benefits, there are benefits specific to your relationship. One of the biggest ones, when you practice natural family planning, it just naturally creates a closer bond between the two of you. You have open communication, and you're both making decisions about your fertility and about planning your family. It's not put on one spouse or the other to carry all that weight and make all those decisions by themselves. So it just really enhances your communication. The other thing it does, as I mentioned, you'll have periods when you're not expanding your family where you are not having sex, when you're abstaining. And that, while it creates some challenges, certainly, that we'll discuss here in a second, it also raises the appreciation of intimacy in your marriage. So rather than taking things for granted or getting into some kind of routine about sex, it varies, and it creates a honeymoon period, in effect, each month that you're choosing to abstain for some short period of time. Then you get to be intimate again. It really does raise the appreciation of that. And there's another aspect of this that we like to call marriage insurance. And the idea is that couples that practice NFP have been shown to have a divorce rate around 5%. As you're probably aware, we can debate the number, but somewhere around 50% of the general population, even among Catholic married couples, result in divorce, which is very unfortunate. And you may say, well, 5% for NFP, 50% for the general population. And what I wouldn't say is that this is some causation. It's not because we practice NFP that we would have a much lower chance of divorce. It's not only that, it's also that you can think about any couple that practices NFP has a strong relationship. The two go hand in hand. So it's not just a cause and effect. The two really go hand in hand. So what you'll find is that couples that practice NFP successfully have a great relationship. They have that open communication. They have that better, healthier appreciation of intimacy. They're often involving God in their marriage to a great extent. And because of that, they have just a stronger, healthier marriage that results in a much lower divorce rate.
You've heard us talk about the many benefits that can be a part of your marriage when you practice NFP. But let's be real, it's not all rainbows and sunshine. So Dustin's going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that couples who practice NFP can face.
And one of those challenges is that it's so misunderstood by other people. Before you had this session here, you may have misunderstood it. It's very likely that people outside of the church misunderstand it. Even your own parents may misunderstand what natural family planning actually is. If you go back and you ask one of your parents, you say, I'm interested in this, I learned about it, and it's something that we're really considering, they may laugh, they may scoff at it and say, yeah, we knew about that, and that's how we conceived you, that's how we had your sister. Because they're talking about actually a different method. It's often referred to as the rhythm method or the calendar method. And the idea behind that, and it was kind of the infancy of natural family planning, was there was an assumption that every woman had a 28-day cycle, and there's a certain week of that cycle or a 4-day period of that cycle where she would have been fertile. So you simply avoid having sex during those 3 or 4 days. Of course, that's not reality. We know now, because of research and because we're so much more in tune with the woman's fertility cycle, that her cycle could vary on any given month. And of course, between woman to woman, all cycles are going to be different. Very few are going to match up on a 28-day cycle. So the result of that was when people were using that rhythm method, there was a high degree of uncertainty, and people did get pregnant when they were trying to postpone pregnancy. But with modern technology, the benefit of the times that we live in now, we greatly understand those things better. There's a lot of different options available to you for how to actually use natural family planning in a highly effective way. And we're going to talk about a few of those here in just a second. Another challenge is, there is some consistency required for this. So depending on the method that you're using, you do have to chart those different indicators of fertility. Whether it's just simply taking your temperature each morning would be an example. So there is, a bit of a challenge with that. It's no different than, say, taking a pill every day if you're using artificial birth control, but it is a bit of a challenge. Probably the biggest one, probably the one that's in your head right now, based on the things that we've said, is that there are periods of abstinence. That's the reality. Whenever you want to achieve pregnancy, it's great. You have sex at any time that you'd like, and the times that you're fertile are the times that you obviously want to emphasize that the most. But the times that you want to postpone pregnancy, the times that you're not called to have children at this time, you don't have sex during those times that you're fertile. So what happens though when that doesn't happen at the right time for you? What if it's your honeymoon? What if it's New Year's Eve and you've been married several years? You've got a child and you're just so looking forward to having a night away with your spouse, and it turns out that weekend is when you're fertile. Well, then you have decisions to make. That's when that closeness really comes into play, and you have to prayerfully consider: should we be considering having children at this time, or should we not? And if we're not, we have to be strong enough as a couple to be able to postpone. Understand that tonight's not the night, but in maybe in 3 days it will be, and I guarantee it will raise the appreciation of intimacy between you in those circumstances, even at the most challenging times.
We've talked to you about the benefits and the challenges of NFP, but you must be sitting there wondering, how does this even work? So we are going to give you a very brief overview of the indicators and the things that you're going to track when we're talking about natural family planning. But we really encourage you to contact your diocese or find a way to learn more about NFP that works best for you. We're going to speak about the symptothermal method to kind of give you an idea of the things that a woman's fertility can show you. So it's a system of awareness of a woman's fertility cycle. And I can tell you that I went to college and I have a degree, and I even took human sexuality, and I still didn't learn enough about a woman's fertility cycle to know about my own. So by taking a course, I have learned so much more about fertility and how that really can be an indicator for many things in a woman's body. But some of the things that we look at are two major things: the temperature and the mucus that a woman's body produces. Now, if you've ever been on artificial birth control, none of those indicators will be present. So there are also lots of informative rules that you can follow if you are coming off of the pill and starting to try to introduce natural family planning into your marriage. Right. So we're going to track the temperature and the mucus, and we're going to chart those together. And combined, those two factors can give you a fairly clear indication of when a woman is fertile or infertile. Generally, a woman has three parts of her cycle. She has phase 1, where she is infertile. Phase 2 is fertile. And phase 3, again, is infertile. If you're looking to achieve pregnancy, then it's okay for you to be intimate through all parts of the cycle. But if you're looking to postpone pregnancy, then you would want during phase 2 to abstain from intercourse with your spouse. So that can be the challenging time, but it's also a great time for you to become closer, and prayerfully consider what God is calling for your marriage.
So when you look at a chart and you see phase 1, 2, and 3, really what's going on in phase 2 is that's when the woman ovulates. So you'll see a spike there in the temperature, and that's the time of ovulation. And then a woman is fertile for several days after the time that she ovulates, and then you reach phase 3, which is an infertile time again until the end of the cycle.
The symptothermal method indicates ovulation by a temperature shift, but there are other methods of natural family planning that can do the same thing. There's the Creighton model, the Billings method, the Marquette method, and of course we've just spoken about the symptothermal method.
And there are others as well. Additional resources will be made available to you through this course so you can get more information on natural family planning. Now, we've given you a lot to think about. This is a big topic. It's a very important topic for you, and it's a very personal decision. For us, we can speak from our own experience. We were married for 5 years without NFP. We've been married for 10 years practicing natural family planning. And for us, it's night and day. Our sex life is much better. We're at great peace with our intimacy. And we'd really encourage you to give NFP a try in your marriage.
We've been blessed with 3 children in our marriage, and I can say that, all of them were achieved using natural family planning, and we were able to postpone pregnancies at those times that we were, not feeling the call to have more children. So it's been a really big blessing for us. And I can tell you that while there may be some minor challenges with practicing natural family planning in your marriage, I would take those minor challenges over the marriage that we had with artificial contraception any day.
Absolutely. So the bottom line again, natural family planning is really good for you individually. It's great for your marriage. And there's a reason that the church endorses it and encourages you to pursue this when you're planning your family. So we hope that you'll give it a try, and we hope that it blesses you the same way it's blessed our marriage.